papoose is out here looking for a trick. And he got one. Yes, beautiful girl, beautiful, gorgeous girl. Y'all ain't gonna tell me Claressa ugly. I'm sorry, she's not. Shit. Don't care what 50 Cent got to say. At this point, the way 50 Cent running through women around here, I don't even think he really like women like that, in my opinion. Okay? Accused of doing some of the same things Diddy has been accused of, so I don't care. Everything but the baby oil.
What happens when someone finally snaps? Not because they're lying, but because the narrative slipped out of their control. Because after Tasha K dropped what she's calling a shocking revelation about Claressa Shields' ex-fiancé, the reaction wasn't quiet. It wasn't graceful, it was rage. And that rage is what pushed this story into overdrive. Claressa didn't respond with a calm denial. She didn't issue a vague statement. According to online reaction, she exploded, posting, reacting, and making it clear she felt crossed, disrespected, and pushed past her limit. And when someone as disciplined and composed as Claressa reacts like that, people stop asking what was said and start asking why it hit that hard. Tasha K didn't frame her revelation as gossip. She framed it as confirmation. Confirmation of things Claressa allegedly knew privately but defended publicly. Confirmation of patterns fans had been piecing together for months. And according to viewers, that framing is what triggered the rage, because it didn't just criticize Claressa's ex. It questioned Claressa's judgment, her silence, and the version of strength she'd been projecting. What made this moment even more intense is the timing. This revelation didn't come during the breakup. It came after Claressa tried to move on, after she stayed quiet, after she refused to play into drama. And when someone reopens a chapter you're trying to close, especially with new claims, anger becomes less about denial and more about boundary violation. Now the internet is split. Some say Claressa's rage proves she's finally standing up for herself. Others say it proves Tasha hit a nerve that wouldn't exist if everything was clean. Tonight, we're breaking down what Tasha K actually revealed, why Claressa reacted so strongly, and why this moment feels less like drama and more like pressure finally breaking through composure. Because rage doesn't always mean guilt. Sometimes it means someone told your story before you were ready to. According to how this unfolded, Tasha K didn't drop her revelation casually. She framed it as something she had sat with, verified quietly, and only released once she felt confident it would stand on its own. And that framing is exactly why it landed so hard on Claressa Shields. The revelation wasn't just about the ex-fiancé's behavior. It was about awareness. Tasha implied that certain red flags, overlaps, and inconsistencies weren't surprises. They were things Claressa allegedly knew about privately while continuing to defend the relationship publicly. That distinction matters because it shifts the story from she was misled to she was managing information. According to Tasha, this wasn't a single betrayal moment. It was a pattern, missed dates explained away, conflicting stories that didn't quite line up, periods of emotional distance that were reframed as work or stress. And while none of that proves wrongdoing on its own, Tasha's claim is that the accumulation was undeniable, and that's what she says Claressa was reacting to. What really triggered the rage, according to online reaction, is that Tasha didn't attack Claressa's strength. She questioned her defense. She suggested that Claressa's public confidence wasn't ignorance, it was protection. Protection of an image. Protection of a decision she wasn't ready to admit was wrong. And when someone reframes your silence as strategy instead of survival, it feels like an attack on your integrity. Another key detail is timing. Tasha dropped this after Claressa had already distanced herself, already stopped engaging, already tried to move forward quietly. According to fans, reopening the situation with new context felt like dragging Claressa back into a story she was actively trying to leave behind, and that's when composure broke. By the end of this part, the takeaway isn't that Tasha exposed something shocking. It's that she redefined what was already known, and redefinition threatens control more than exposure ever could. According to how fans and commentators are reading the moment, Claressa Shields' rage wasn't about disproving what Tasha K said. It was about losing control of the narrative. And that distinction explains the intensity of her reaction far better than guilt or innocence ever could. Claressa didn't come out calmly correcting details. She didn't methodically dismantle the claims. Instead, her response was emotional, fast, and defensive. According to observers, that usually happens when someone feels misrepresented, not when they feel exposed. Because exposure invites rebuttal. Misrepresentation invites anger. What seemed to bother Claressa most was the implication that her silence and strength were strategic rather than protective. For someone whose public image is built on discipline, transparency, and mental toughness, being framed as someone who knowingly defended a flawed situation cuts deep. According to fans, that framing attacked not just her relationship history, but her character. Another layer here is timing and agency. Claressa had already decided how she wanted to move on. Quietly, without spectacle, without turning her private pain into content. Tasha's revelation disrupted that plan. It forced Claressa back into the conversation on someone else's terms. And when people lose the ability to decide how their story is told, rage is a natural response, even if the underlying facts are complicated. Fans also noticed that Claressa's anger wasn't directed solely at the claims. It was directed at the audience reaction. The jokes, the assumptions, the sudden certainty from strangers. According to analysis, that kind of rage comes from realizing that once a narrative takes hold online, your intent no longer matters as much as how people interpret your silence. By this point, the situation stopped being about whether Tasha was right or wrong. It became about ownership. Who gets to define what Claressa knew when she knew it, and why she handled it the way she did? And when someone else claims that authority publicly, the response is rarely calm. By the end of this part, one thing is clear. Claressa wasn't raging because the truth came out. She was raging because her version of the truth was taken out of her hands. After the initial rage, something unexpected happened. Public sympathy split in real time. Not because new facts emerged, but because people started questioning how anger was being used. According to online reaction, Claressa's intensity didn't shut the conversation down. It redirected it. And redirection can be risky when the audience is already primed to analyze tone, timing, and motive. What changed the mood was the contrast. Tasha's delivery was framed as measured and contextual. Claressa's response was fast and emotional. That contrast alone became a storyline. Viewers began comparing styles instead of claims. And once style becomes the focus, the substance gets interpreted through bias rather than evidence. Many fans empathized with Claressa immediately. They saw a woman pushed past her breaking point, dragged back into a chapter she was trying to close. For them, the rage read as human, a response to being provoked, not exposed. But others read it differently. They saw defensiveness where they expected clarity. And defensiveness, fair or not, invites more probing. Another factor that shifted sympathy was escalation. Claressa's reaction didn't stop at denial. It expanded into frustration with the internet, with commentary channels, with people speculating at all. According to analysts, when anger widens like that, it stops targeting the claim and starts targeting the crowd, which can make neutral observers feel accused simply for watching. This is where the story deepened. People began asking whether rage helps or hurts in moments like this. Does it protect boundaries, or does it fuel curiosity? Does it reclaim agency, or does it confirm that the wound is still open? The audience didn't agree, and that disagreement is why the story stayed alive. By this point, the narrative wasn't moving forward on facts. It was moving forward on interpretation of emotion. And once emotion becomes the evidence people argue about, no response can fully satisfy everyone. The result? A situation where sympathy and skepticism coexist, and neither side feels resolved. According to how this played out after the initial backlash, this wasn't just another viral argument. It marked a shift in how Claressa is perceived publicly. Not as an athlete, not as a champion, but as a person navigating loss, exposure, and narrative pressure all at once. And that shift is why this moment feels bigger than the revelation itself. For years, Claressa Shields has been seen as unshakable, focused, controlled, someone who doesn't crack under pressure. According to commentators, that image worked in her favor until this moment. Because when someone with that reputation finally reacts emotionally, the internet doesn't see vulnerability first. It sees disruption of expectation. Some fans believe this reaction humanized her, that it finally showed the cost of carrying strength without pause. They argue that rage doesn't mean guilt, it means exhaustion. Exhaustion from being analyzed, doubted, and spoken about without consent. From being expected to absorb disrespect quietly because you're strong enough to handle it. But others interpreted the moment more critically. According to that side of the conversation, the reaction introduced uncertainty where confidence once lived. Not about facts, but about control. When composure breaks publicly, people begin asking questions they didn't ask before. Not because they should, but because visibility invites scrutiny. This is where Tasha K's role becomes secondary. The focus is no longer on what she revealed. It's on what the reaction revealed. That Claressa still cares deeply about how this story is framed, that the wound isn't closed, and that the version of strength she's been presenting may have come at a personal cost. At this stage, the damage, if any, isn't reputational. It's emotional. The realization that once a story escapes your control, even rage can't put it back where it belongs. And the internet doesn't forget reactions. It archives them. By the end of this part, the truth is uncomfortable but clear. This wasn't about an ex-fiancé. It was about identity under pressure. At this point, what this moment really exposed isn't just a revelation or a reaction. It exposed how fragile control becomes once your story leaves your hands. When Claressa Shields reacted with rage after Tasha K dropped her claims, the internet didn't just listen. It judged the emotion more than the information. And that's the trap, because rage doesn't automatically mean guilt. But it also doesn't stop curiosity. Claressa wasn't just responding to Tasha. She was responding to an audience that had already decided it was entitled to answers. An audience that interpreted silence as strategy, strength as arrogance, and composure as confirmation. And when someone finally breaks under that pressure, the reaction gets reframed as evidence, whether it should or not. This story stopped being about an ex-fiancé a long time ago. It became about who gets to tell the story first, and who has to clean up the interpretation after. Now ask yourself this. Should someone be allowed to process betrayal privately without being accused of hiding something? Does rage invalidate pain, or does it prove how deep that pain actually runs? And why does the internet demand calm explanations from people whose lives are being dissected in real time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Keep it honest, not cruel. If this breakdown helped you see why reactions matter as much as revelations, like the video so others can find it. Share it if you believe emotional responses shouldn't be weaponized against people who didn't ask to be part of the spectacle. And subscribe for more long-form breakdowns that focus on power, narrative control, and what really happens when silence, exposure, and pressure collide. Because the loudest reactions don't always reveal the truth. Sometimes they reveal how much someone has been holding in.